Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manoj Agarwal, and today I'm very excited to have Noelle Silver, who is an amazing leader in the field of artificial intelligence. The list of her accomplishments are quite long. The kind of impact she has made is humongous. So I will not attempt to go over it all, but I will ask her to share some of the key highlights from her career. Currently, she is working at IBM as a AI executive. Before that, she has been working with companies like, I believe, Red Hat, Microsoft. She is a Microsoft MVP in the field of artificial intelligence. As I said, she has done a lot. So, welcome, Noelle. Please uh, tell us a little bit about yourself. And you have a very inspiring story, very interesting story. So, let's go down that memory lane and get to know you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, you're right. I said the same thing. I always like, how do I not go through all of the things that I've done? Eventually your resume, right, gets so long, you're like, I have to cut this a little bit. So I'll definitely though share kind of my humble beginnings, right? I think one of the most interesting things about my career is that I've achieved, some levels of success. We'll talk about them today. But I didn't really get into kind of traditional education. So I wasn't very good at high school. I never graduated, never got a diploma, but I did do very well in testing. So I was able to qualify for university. I went to a university, again, was not really served in the way I was entrepreneurial. Like I wanted to just like learn by doing and implement and get into a business. And luckily Y2K was happening, right? And so at that time, similar to now, the world was so desperate for skills in, software development that they didn't actually care where you came from, what you knew. I mean, it's exactly the same as where we are today in data. Anyway, and so I ended up jumping ship from college, going to work for actually IBM way back in, like I said, Y2K, 1998, and was there for like 12 years in the season of microservices, which is, like I said, I just feel like I'm right back there in that same momentum, except instead of talking all about microservices and breaking up monolithic code, now I'm talking about data, but it feels very familiar. But yeah, so now fast forward my AI journey. You can all find me on LinkedIn and see all the gory details of my historical past. But my AI journey was pretty interesting. I went to Amazon. I was recruited there to help out with AWS, Amazon Web Services, was a principal architect. And funny thing happened, a little known product, Alexa, was born, Amazon Alexa. And when that product was started, really the company was just looking for anyone who would like jump on board to this thing. We didn't know if it would work. No one had talked to technology in their kitchen before. So I joined that team and started seeing just massive success because I was able to demonstrate what the world needed to see, which was you don't have to have any special skill sets. You can build with this technology, applied AI, and deliver huge amounts of value for customers. So I ended up building over 100 applications for Alexa. I'm still getting paid by Alexa today to maintain those applications. I have over 1 million unique users of those skills. And so Microsoft, of course, came calling after I did my work at Amazon and said, we are going to do the exact same thing. We're going to take 17 research models and productize them, and we could use your help. And so I went over there. I was hired by Harry Shum, who is head of research, and ended up getting adopted by Scott Guthrie, who is head of Azure, and ended up really kind of shepherding all of these projects we never thought would see the light of day into massive production level operational AI components. And so that's kind of what led me here. Now I call myself an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur because I do have, 6 years ago, I started this AI Leadership Institute. And I remember when I started, I was like, I don't know what we're going to do, but we have to help people. And today, 6 years later, we're doing just that. We're basically, I go on stages globally and I really mentor people who are trying to, like boards, executives who are trying to understand how to harness AI and not, and actually achieve the dream that we're all talking about.
Absolutely. Amazing journey. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it must have been exciting to sort of, be at the forefront of Alexa, just human to human to device interaction, which was, I think Alexa was the first one doing voice communication, if I recall, right?
That's right. And we had a big, long, like head
Yeah,
start, right? Google
yeah,
didn't come out for a couple years. So there was
yeah.
quite a bit of time where we owned the landscape, if you will.
That's awesome. And then the other thing that really jumped out at me was something that you said, like, you don't really need, PhDs or all these formal education. Um, you can actually just learn on the go and then apply the skills as long as you're passionate about doing, you know, making an impact on other people, changing the world around you, isn't it?
Yes. And, one thing I love about the technology today is big companies, Google, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon. I mean, these are called the hyperscalers, right? They've built this technology. They've built hundreds of machine learning models and now made them available as APIs, as
Yeah.
programming interfaces, which means if you are a developer, you now can become what I call an applied AI engineer, right? So now everything that you would have done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you can now do even better, even faster, even more accurately, right? I love the idea of being able to like, oh, I'm a web developer building a retail site, but now I can let you send me a picture of something you saw on the street. I can use computer vision through an API and actually find that in my inventory and let you buy it. Like when could we ever do anything like that as a web developer or as a full stack developer? It's really unleashing, I feel like I could teach anyone to code, right? It's like I could teach anyone a foreign language. If you have, like you said, the persistence and the enthusiasm to do it, this is not a skill set that requires special skills or you have to be born with the knowledge, right? These are acquirable skills, but more importantly, we need people who are passionate about the problem that they're solving. And so that's, I see a huge opportunity there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the other thing I will add here is that, because I started my careers around the same time, approximately the same time as you did. And I remember even if we had to, launch a small website, we had to buy servers, we had to have a data center, we had to,
Yes,
deploy.
DNS.
Yeah, exactly. But now, as you said, like these APIs cost next to nothing. And basically, in many cases, you can just sign up for free and try out all these, uh, powerful technologies and implement it in your organization. Now,
Exactly.
before I go move forward, I also want to highlight, women in technology is one of the issues that I notice a lot, because frankly speaking, whenever I have more women on the project, those projects generally tend to go much better. So I think we need to increase the number of women in the tech sector, and you have done amazingly well. So what is your secret? How can you share some of your secrets for the women in our audience, so that they can not only encourage themselves to get into technology, but encourage their daughters or their
Yes.
kids around them to get into science and technology.
It's such a good question. Yeah. So it's multiple fold, right? So I actually went on TikTok during the pandemic and started creating a bunch of content around being in technology. I had over 1 million views on TikTok. And all those millions of views, it's funny, I now will meet someone and they'll be like, oh my gosh, my daughter knows who you are. Right.
Yeah,
And their daughters are like in 7th and 8th grade. So I do think the biggest thing that the biggest secret is really just realizing that wherever you are in your journey, whether you're just thinking about starting, whether you just started, whether you're halfway through, whether you're like me, a little bit more further along in our career, we are an example to the person who's just looking for an example. And there are so few of us willing to take a stage, pick up a microphone, even just like do small little stories on Instagram. There's so few of us willing to say we do this for a living and we actually enjoy it. I will say, being a woman in tech, it does take a special breed because it can be difficult. And there are some systemic challenges with our industry. It's why it is the way it is, but it won't change without us, right? It will only get better. And to your point about who it should, kind of be thinking about this, it's not just, of course, we as women getting into this field, but it's all the dads who have daughters. It's all of, anyone who knows a woman should be like, hey, have you thought about tech? I'll tell you a funny story. I was at Denny's, which is a local like restaurant diner place here. And there was a woman who served us, and we had 7 people because I have a gaggle of humans that I take care of. She memorized every single one of our high maintenance orders, right? With ketchup, without ketchup, on the side, all of it. She memorized it all in her head. and went and got it right? Many times people will do this and they fail, but she got it right. And I immediately took that as an opportunity to share with her, there's a place for you. Like, we need your brain in technology. And she had never, ever considered it. And she's not in the echo chambers of people talking about women in tech, right? Her Instagram feed isn't full of women in tech. So the only way people will know if you see a little bit of capability in them is if you actually tell them that this world is possible. And I always tell people, like, I have zero classical training in AI. The only thing I have is a passion for the problem and the willingness to learn whatever it takes to deliver. So I taught myself Java, I taught myself Node.js, I taught myself Python, I built my first machine learning model, I've built a deep, neural network. Like, I don't have any reason to know that other than a passion to bring the problem closer to the solution. And I think there's a lot more women out there that would be interested if they just knew it was an option for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we need them because technology is sort of ruling our life now, and we need the rest of the 50% of the humanity to join the force. All right. So now the other thing is of course, women in technology is a big issue. But then let's just talk about AI as a technology, because it is fundamentally changing our world. And I believe in next 10, 20 years, it'll completely change how we work and how we look at work and all that. And I feel like a lot of people are unaware, even at the highest levels of decision makers, what AI is doing, what is the future looking like. And since you sit at the top of this chain, and you have a very, very different vantage point on seeing what is happening, what is coming in the future, can you share with us your worldview of how AI is going to affect us? And not only when we talk about, we can get into tech, we can create these models, but just a little bit of general awareness of how AI is going to impact the world, what it will mean to our jobs, our lives, and all that stuff.
Absolutely. So I actually was recently at Miami-Dade College. We were both on a committee there and did a really interesting talk about the future of work, because I do think a lot of people either in a career and they're thinking about changing or are just starting their careers are like, okay, it sounds interesting, but what does that actually mean? So I'll give you a couple of examples. I always like to use examples because it helps crystallize, especially because we don't want to dive too deeply into the technology. Absolutely. But one area that I focus on is what we call intelligent workflows, right? It basically means that there are lots of processes in the world. Think about insurance claims, especially let's just think about death insurance, right? When a spouse, and I've gone through a very similar situation where a spouse, basically you lose your spouse and then you're immediately confronted with taking care of your whole family, figuring out income, and you go, and the first thing they ask you to do is fill out massive amounts of paperwork, fax them in, scan them in, and then someone is handwriting them. Like, it's a huge pain. And then it's wrought with errors, right? So it takes you weeks, maybe months, and you're dealing with all of this emotional challenges, right? So it's just one of those problems that's close to my heart where I'm like, we could fix this. This is exactly what AI is for. And so we've now created solutions at IBM. We've created solutions that go to these companies and say, you know what we could do? We could create a conversational agent, right? We know this now. This is the good news, is that Alexa made it possible for everyone to understand what it means to talk to your computer, right? So it's not foreign to people anymore. So when we say a chatbot's going to ask you for your death certificate, okay, no problem. On my phone, I take a picture of it, I scan it in. With 100% accuracy, AI or a model is going to scan that document you just sent a picture of, and it's going to pull out every piece of information that you scanned in. You didn't have to create it, and it's going to fill out all the forms that you need to fill out. All you have to do is look at it and go, yeah, that looks good. It's amazing. It goes from weeks to days, sometimes even hours, to get a decision in a really tough, and this is just one use case, but a really tough part of life. And so the cool thing is that, like, there's multiple people that get helped, right? The consumer, we can reduce friction. It's what I call frictionless. It's my dream of the world, right? We reduce friction for customers to get what they need, whether it's an insurance claim approved, whether it's, buying something that they want, whether it's, getting advice. right? Getting therapy, all of these things can be improved through the use of these models that augment the human on the other side. So the customer is going to be happier because their friction is less. But then the individual doing the work, the lawyer, the what do they call them? Actuaries, right? All these people that are like bogged down with hundreds of PDFs to look at with their own eyes, all of a sudden get to look up outside of the stack of papers, let a computer do that analysis, and only focus on the 20% of challenges and issues that need their attention, right? It's a huge opportunity, I think, for them to be able to like help more. I mean, all of us, when we get a job, we want to help more people. We don't want to spend 45% of our day scanning emails with our eyes. It's not,
Yeah.
so there's so much opportunity there. But then here's, of course, I should mention the business outcome, right? So the customer's happier, the people doing the work are happier, but guess what? The business ends up being more productive. It has more creative staff, right? Everyone wins. Like the business actually sees tangible productivity increases and reduction in cost. So when you actually can take a step back and look holistically, which I've done across hundreds of companies that have implemented AI successfully, like this is magic that we're doing here. The only challenge now is scale. And that's kind of my specialty, right? It's like, okay, great. We did that for one little model. How do we do that for everybody else? Like, how do we do that for the world? And that's why now I focus on responsible AI and I call it scaling responsible AI, right? How do we get those responsible models to actually operate at billions of inferences a day, which is where some of the models I have worked on are at now.
Nice. Very
Hopefully
good.
that's helpful.
Of course. So it seems like the future obviously is going to be much more friendly because things will get done faster. There'll be less frustration, less holdups, less red tape, and less emotional outbursts because I think computers
Yes.
are not going to be challenged every day with
Yes.
their day-to-day life scenarios. Now, on the flip side, how do we explain to people who are worried that AI is going to take over the world, or AI is going to cause loss in jobs and things of that nature? So what are your views around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get asked it all the time. Mainly, it's interesting though. If you do a little bit of research, in 1922, there was a collection of articles written on various publications that you can go and find in microfiche, if any of you remember what that is. But you could go and find these articles written way back in old newspaper days that would say machines are taking over the world. And I think it's hilarious because it's our own like human tendency to fall into fear when there are things that we don't understand, right? Which is why I created AI Leadership Institute. I was like, literacy is the key. These kind of sessions, right? Literacy is the key. You won't feel a fear of your job when you realize what AI actually is. And it is a tool. I play a video. You can go look it up on Google. It's like Commons Microsoft video. It's his first one. And he says it's a tool. It's for an artist, it's a paintbrush, right? For a musician, it's the guitar. For, a doctor, it's the stethoscope. Like AI isn't the thing, it's the thing that helps you, right? It's the tool. And without a person to wield the tool, it really means nothing. And of course, there are some, I love science fiction. I was introduced into the world of technology by my dad as a youngster. I was like 6 years old and read my first science fiction novel and then like got hooked. But in all of those books, right, there was not so happy of endings, right? Sometimes the robots took over the world. But the interesting part about all of the books that I read was that it was less about the robots taking over the world and more about the philosophical evolution of the humans participating. And sometimes the humans evolved and it ended well. Sometimes the humans got stuck and it didn't end well. And so I think it's more of a story of how are we going to use this technology, right? Part of responsible AI is avoiding a black box. I think that's part of the scariness of AI is that if you don't understand it, it's perceived as like a box that you click a button and something magical happens. When the reality is, and we're doing this now today with hundreds of customers, is that we want to expose what's in that box. There's no need for it to be secret. There are no secrets, right? We want transparency. We want explainability. And then when you can see it, you can trust it. And then when you trust it, you can use it. And so I think literacy ends up becoming your key, right? So if you're on the fence or wondering or watching too much Black Mirror, right, you can instead learn a little bit more, build your own model. You don't have to be a special skill set person. Like, you don't have to go to school to do that. You could just go to Udemy or Coursera, take a course, build a model from scratch, see that it's mostly just math and math to solve business outcomes. It's actually kind of beautiful when you understand what's happening underneath it all.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And I think a key message from there is getting familiar with the technology and using it as a tool. Because as you said, in 1922, around that time frame, automobile was invented. So today
Yes.
we will not dream of going even to the supermarket 2 blocks away without our car. But back then it was a huge issue, like, where the all the people who are taking care of the horses gonna go, who's gonna take care of
Yes.
the carts and all that.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I always talk to people about the elevator, right?
yeah,
Can you imagine the first time they took the person out of the elevator and they asked you
yeah,
to, the doors were going to shut by themselves?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
those people were probably terrified, right?
yeah.
Like, we're going to die. This is
Yeah,
bad. And now we get into elevators and we don't even push the buttons anymore,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's an evolution of thought and awareness. But I think you and I, and really anyone who has expertise in this area, it's our job to create that comfort in the world by sharing it and not
yeah,
hiding it. Because I do think
yeah,
sometimes we create these little knowledge, echo chambers, and we know amongst ourselves, but we don't make it plain to the world. That's
yeah.
why I think shows like this are so important to do.
Yeah, exactly. And one more thing I'll add here is just to add to the general awareness is that these technologies we have been humans have been inventing it for millennia, and we use it to our advantage. But in most cases, before AI, they were more trying to relieve our mundane things, like our physical energy. Like all these levers, all these
Yes.
pulleys, all this mechanical stuff is trying to help us to do more with our not so able bodies. But with AI, it is actually supplementing our brain to do more without putting too much cognitive load on our mind. So I think looking at it from that angle could also help people adopt these technologies. um,
Absolutely.
so now tell us a little bit about your own journey. I would like to explore a little bit about the challenges you faced throughout your journey, as a technologist, as a successful entrepreneur, as a successful executive, and what are the lessons you learned from it? Because you have had a tremendous success story. So I'm pretty sure you learned some really key lessons that will be very helpful for people who may not want to spend all that time learning those
Yes.
lessons.
Yes, I always say if I can take my decades and turn it into days for you, I'm very happy
Mhm.
to do so.
Yeah,
Yeah, so of course, I've been in this industry now 25 years. I'm also a Latina. I'm a woman in tech, so I have a lot going for me and not so much for me. And so there's a few stages of like evolution or changes that I had to make as I got into the workforce. When I first started, and this was before, like, we weren't talking about diversity, right? Like, we were in Y2K. They did not care about my color or gender. They were just like, if you could do the work, awesome. Like, come and do it.
yeah,
So that was great. Except I went and started teaching people. My job was to teach people Java in the very early days of Java. And when I was teaching them, I ran into, again, systemic issues. It wasn't like the organization, it wasn't my manager. It was really systemically when I stood in front of a class as a like right out of college, trying to teach old dogs new tricks,
yeah.
right? There was a bit of like, what do you even know about this, right? I
Yeah.
remember people used to call me kiddo. Like, in class, I'm teaching. Could you imagine talking to your professor and be like, hey, kiddo? Anyway, in hindsight, I'm like, it was crazy. But I started to change myself. And I always encourage those of you who are starting on a new journey, any journey, to go look at this short. It's by Pixar. It's called Pearl, Purl. It's awesome. it's all about kind of how we all code switch a little bit when we get into new opportunity. And in my very first job, I did that. I like put my hair in a bun. I wore my hair in a bun for 2 years. I got glasses that I didn't need. I just tried to look the part. I wore pants. I basically looked like an IBMer, as much as I could. And it worked, which was the challenging part, right? Is that I got less confrontation the more I switched into looking like everyone else. The challenge was I got more disenchanted with behaving that way over time. So my hope is that, yeah, you might do a little bit of that when you first encounter a new role or a new opportunity. But the sooner you can recognize, like, okay, there's some things about myself that I'm willing to, accommodate, be a bit of a chameleon to make, everyone feel like I'm part of the team. But at the same time, I will never lose my authentic self. And the more I was authentic, the better my opportunities became. Because otherwise, people end up going, oh, Noelle, I know what you are. I know what you do. I know what you like. And then they recommend me for opportunities. But because I wasn't myself, I didn't want those. Like, I'm like, no, I don't do that. I don't want that. Right. So that authenticity is incredibly important. But some of the more tactical things, right? I remember getting into roles and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people now, have had very similar experiences where I get into a role and they would say, here's what we want from you. Here's the expectations we have from you. And then I'd get into the role and do those things. But as you can see, I'm enthusiastic, I'm loud, I'm a connector. Like I go in and I just start doing Noelle magic stuff. And then almost, within a year or two, those organizations are like, so Noelle, if you could just be a little quieter and not, raise your hand every time something is wrong. Like if you could just not be you so much and more be like in this little lane over here, that would be better. And what I found as a individual, my success was really handcrafting my career, not going for the first and only opportunity I saw at a time, like handcrafting it. And then once I got into a position, being very entrepreneurial, right? Looking for opportunities to serve at my best level. So at Microsoft, for example, I was in engineering, but the way I served Microsoft the best was in talking to executives about AI. And this was 3 years ago. I ended up influencing 600 million in revenue in sales that year as an engineer, which means I didn't get paid for it. As an engineer. But what I found was I was valuable to the company in this way, right? And the field loved me, right? The sales organization was like, oh my gosh, Noelle, you're amazing. Here's all it was a dream. The only thing that was missing was I was in an organization that didn't understand what I was doing, right? They're like, okay, you drove 600 million revenue. We don't get paid by revenue, right? We're engineering. We get paid by delivering product. And so there was this immediate disconnect, and that will happen over and over if you're not super transparent about your skill set. And that maybe leads to, oh, I just dropped my hats. Maybe that leads to, like, the last thing is that I really had to be very open and like manage expectations every step of the way in my journey. As soon as I like laid back a little bit and wasn't like foot on the gas, here's who I am, I ended up having people who misunderstood my value in the organization. So this is why I always tell people, build your brand, not your company's brand, not your product's brand, your Noelle brand or your you brand, right? Build a brand that's uniquely you, because that way, when you go to a company, they know what they're getting. There's no surprises, right? I talk every day about responsible AI, every day about entrepreneurship, every day about, building wealth. Like they know what they're getting and they know how much I talk about it. And so it's not a surprise. I feel like one of my biggest challenges was when I wasn't transparent enough about what I wanted to a company, they didn't know how to serve me in the way that I wanted to serve them. And so it was a mismatch and I ended up having to find somewhere else to be.
These are great. Very, very valuable insights. I think, if somebody is listening and they actually just implemented today, I think you've cut short their journey by decades. But I think a few things that you mentioned, being authentic, that takes a lot of courage. Takes a lot of power to stand out and say, okay, as you said, like I want to fit in the system, but I don't want to become exactly a clone of the system itself. And handcrafting your career is another one where a lot of people just go with the flow and And then 10, 20, 30 years down the road, they say, I'm not where I was supposed to be, and but yet they just let the opportunities pass by. So this is great. Now, so let me just dig a little bit deeper on that topic. So how do you find the courage and the power to be authentic? How do you how do you face that criticism when people say you're too loud, or whatever their perception is of you, and they disapprove, or they they have a way for you to sort of include them into their own picture of the world?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one thing I did have to uncover, and I do meditate every day. So I spend time in silence, just kind of checking in with the way that I'm feeling, what I'm thinking about. So I spend time every single day kind of meditating, which is unique. So some people are like, you're different than everyone. And so I will say that might be different than everyone, because not a lot of people do that, spend that time. But what comes with that is a bit of space between, like, when something happens, I can mentally create space between the thing happening and what I need to do. So I often will say, when someone says something to me, I almost never like viscerally react, right? Like in the moment go, throw down my badge, right? I have enough self-awareness to be like, all right, I need to take a minute. I need to take a walk. I need to, and I will excuse myself, even if it's abruptly in the middle of a meeting. I will gracefully excuse myself so that I can figure out what's going on, right? And I think in doing that, creating that space between someone saying, hey, I know we hired you to do this, but don't do that anymore. And having, like, in that moment, I'm like what I would say in my younger days is, but you hired me for that, right? Like, which no good comes from that reaction, by the way, right? Like, no good comes from an immediate disagreement with someone. As a matter of fact, my goal is to immediately agree with people, no matter what they say. Immediately agree, because their view is valid, because it comes through their lens. And you mentioned it comes through their lens, even if it's limited, even if it's only through this window and I see much bigger. They can't help that, right? That's literally as far as they can see. It's like a little hole. They can only see through the hole, even though I have a broader view. And so I have to be very empathetic in that moment. I have these principles that I live by called mindful leadership principles. And one of them is empathy. Like, you have to realize that even when someone's giving you a bad performance review that you don't think you deserved, or shutting you down in a meeting, even all the women in tech stuff, mansplaining and talking over, all of that, I try in the moment to have real empathy that that person probably has no idea, because if they did, right, humans don't want to hurt people, and then figure out a way to work through it. But that distance, I think, is so important, because oftentimes, and in my early career, I was very reactionary, right? If someone hurt me, I immediately let them know that they hurt me without taking any stock. And like you said, that authenticity, here's the key, like super secret sauce. The way that I'm able to be authentic, like courageously every day, is I figure out little ways to be authentic to myself. So I literally will, like, write down, I have this, I drink protein every morning. I have little boxes that represent, did I do this every day? Do I meditate every day? That's why I know when I've done it, right? Do I drink a gallon of water every day? Find something that you can do every single day and track it for yourself. Because what ends up happening, even if you just do it for a week, is that you now have proven cognitively to yourself that you can do that thing, that you can be trusted, that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And when you build that confidence, it's like, I think in the Bible, it says, do with the little things, and then I'll give you the big things, right? When you can have that discipline and that courage to do what you tell yourself you're going to do, it's much easier to do that with the world. And so that's like a little trick you can do. Just give yourself a mini goal, something easy, something you work out every day, something easy, and then do it for 7 days, and then reward yourself and be like, I did this. I said I would, and I did. And it's super powerful.
This is tremendous value you're dropping right here. So, it's unbelievable. So meditation, I mean, that's I'm a student of meditation for almost a decade myself. And I have so many mentees, which I say, okay, if you're not going to meditate, there's not even a point to go through this process. So
Yeah.
I believe meditation is something that everybody should adopt. So now let us talk about mentors, because I feel like you also mentor a lot of people, and getting this far, I have seen mentors play a lot of a critical role in our lives. So can you tell us a little bit about the kind of mentors who coach you or mentored you, and what kind of impact they had on your life?
Yes. So for years, decades, I used to say, I don't have any mentors. Like, there's no one who's going as fast as me in the direction that I want to go. Like, there's no one I can look up to. And then I realized, like, I was wrongfully thinking of mentors in a very traditional way, like someone I get on the phone with and chat it up on Zoom or in person or have coffee with. And I realized actually I have lots of mentors, but I try at any given point to only focus on two main teachers in my life, like two main people that I'm gobbling up what they say and implementing, because that is something that I found is another little secret to my success is implementation, results, being results driven. As a Latina and a woman, the more results I can generate, the less I get questioned about all the other nonsense, right? The less I have to worry, because I can just be like, I know you got one certification, I got 5. So do we have to talk about that anymore? Right?
Mhm.
But my mentors, I have 2 of them now. I have now shifted away from kind of going towards male mentors and tried to find female mentors. And neither of them are in tech per se, but one of them is Elena Cardone. I think actually one of your guests recently was a Grant Cardone fan.
Mhm.
Elena is basically Grant is her husband,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
she created this whole philosophy around building an empire and returning the foundation of like the family dynamic. And I have a lot of children, I have a partner, my dad lives with me, right? So I have a lot of family values. We sit down at the table every day. We like a lot of things that I realize most families don't do when we have guests over, right? They're like, most people don't eat and say grace and say
Yeah.
grateful for gratitude statements. Like most families don't do that. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to find someone who emulated this type of behavior. So Elena Cardone is hugely fond of this. She also is something that I'm working on very closely, is building and architecting an empire, right? When it's not just I work for X company, but I'm actually building a whole bunch of stuff, right? I have multiple startups. Every one of these companies that I'm an advisor to, right, are part of my empire. But at the same time, I need to be careful who I interact with. And so she focuses a lot on your inner circle and creating a strong foundation. And those are critical things for someone like me, especially as I'm less than 1% of the world's technology executives are women that are Hispanic, like less than 1%. So I'm alone up here, right? There are not many people like me, but I have an inner circle of people that I know, I like, I trust, that will protect me, right? In situations where a troll says something mean, or someone says something that's not advantageous, or life happens, right? And a bad thing happens to me. So understanding these principles of building an empire and building an inner circle and having that security, especially as a woman in this space, is critical. And then the other woman is less traditional. I hope you all won't judge me. But her name is Stormy Wellington, and she's awesome. She's like, she grew up from nothing. She had like a really tough childhood, had her first child as a teenager. Anyway, but she's now a multi-million-dollar earner for a industry that's super hard to work in, network marketing, right? And it's not like she's a network marketer. She was just like, I need to make money for my family. So I'm going to find where I could do it here. And then she just did it. So she's a hustler in the same way that I am. But in such a different way. And I think diversity of thought is so critical, because,
Mhm.
and that's why I only have 2, because if I get too much diversity, I can't take
Yeah.
action. But I can take some things from Elena, some things from Stormy. I've met them both, very big fans, but I don't talk to them every day, right? They're not my like BFF. I look at them as teachers and I learn and implement what they do. And when I do, it works. I mean, Elena's a multi-billion-dollar person. Stormy's a little less, is in the multi-million dollars. I'm on my way there, right? So I've got a couple different people to give me a vision for my future. And I think that vision is critical to your success.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, mentors have had a tremendous impact on my life as well. And everybody I talk to who are who are pursuing their success or are already successful. So thank you so much for sharing those names as well as the details of how they have helped you. Thank you so much. And that's, I think, all the time we have. Thank you so much for being with us today. Before I let you go, can you tell us when people want to reach out, they want to connect with you, what is the best way they can connect with you?
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And if anybody wants to connect with me, I always say I have 5 minutes for any new friend. I would love to get introduced to you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find, Noelle Silver. You can also go to my website, noellesilver.com. I do keynotes all over the world. If you want to have someone at your next event, I am here for it. But such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here and to let me share my story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.